going on, everybody? Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live. Very live, actually, right now. So, I guess over the past month or so, I've been thinking about a theme, and that is kind of the importance of travel, which I know I've talked about, international flexibility and things like that a few times, especially now when the world is so chaotic. But, the step that precedes like relocation flexibility is travel. I mean, you would before you're going to internationally relocate, you would have to go somewhere and see if it fits for you and see if you like it and things like that. So, again, I think having international flexibility is really important these days. But what precedes that, in addition to some other obvious logistics, is that you would have to travel and, figure out where you want to land and what language you want to speak and what culture you want to be around and what the food is like and how the people treat each other and things like that. And those are things I think that could only be learned by traveling. So, as I've said by now many times, I grew up in the United States. And the United States, for the most part, is kind of a monoculture. I've lived in Texas, I lived in Georgia, I lived in Oregon, Washington, Florida, Pennsylvania. And, the culture has a little bit of variation, but not a lot of variation. But when you go to other countries and other continents, things change pretty dramatically in terms of food, in terms of how people treat each other and kind of social decorum and things like that. I mean, a person could live like I did, could live in the United States for 40 years and go to another country or in another continent and have a completely different experience of social interaction. Obviously hoping for the better, but could be worse. So, those are things that we learn by traveling, is that life can be radically different in other places in ways that you can't imagine if you've only stayed in one culture. So that's just something I think about. And that has its importance. Something else that has importance, I think, is for parents and spouses and friends even, and in my case, being an uncle, is to teach our people how to travel. Your people are your family and friends, because that has immense value for life. Not simply, travel isn't simply, renting a hotel and buying a ticket. Travel teaches us things that we would never learn staying at home. And one of the things that we learn from traveling is that if you, travel successfully and reasonably well, one of the lessons that you learn from traveling is that you have options and that you don't have to be trapped anywhere. You don't have to be trapped in your house. You don't have to be trapped in your city, in your state, in your country. You don't have to be trapped with your family. You don't have to be trapped with your job. You can hit the damn road and change your life in a matter of days, practically in a matter of hours. And I've known a few happy people in my life, but I've known a lot of miserable people in my life. And the most miserable people I've known are the people who stay trapped in lives that they don't like. And at whatever level, and even at the people I know at the multi-million-dollar level, multi-millionaires. And I give them the benefit of the doubt. I assume that they like working in their offices and looking out over parking lots. if that's what they want, they can do that for the rest of their lives. But I've also known a lot of miserable people who could have been more free and could have enjoyed life more, and they never gave themselves permission to do that. They just stayed in their own ruts and were ultimately miserable because of that. And some of those people were my own family members, you know. And so I never really traveled with we traveled a little bit when I was a kid, but we as a family never really traveled. And I suppose in some way, of the laundry list of things I would change about my own family, travel is one of them. And I'm going to give you an extreme example of bad travel that looks like good travel. And I'll use that to kind of close out this piece. And this is from my own history. Now that I know how to travel quite well, obviously when I was, 16 years old, I didn't know how to travel worth a damn, I grew up in Texas. By that time, I had been to South America quite a bit, Canada a few times, and whatever else. But I wasn't, an experienced traveler by any stretch of the imagination. Better than nothing, I suppose. But something that's kind of stayed with me, and I've thought about it a lot lately, now that I'm teaching, teaching other people how to be a good traveler, like people in my own family. I never had anybody teach me that, and it's a really valuable asset to have in life, is to know how to travel well and, mix with other cultures and roll with it, The other day, we took a tour that should have been in Spanish, and it ended up being in Portuguese. And, those are just things that you learn to roll with when you learn how to travel well. Sorry, my wife is trying to tell me to shut up. Dame 3 minutos más. So, anyway, that was just kind of a shock to me. Just different from my expectation. We paid for a tour. We went on this little tour for the day, and everybody was speaking Portuguese. But if you speak Spanish, then you can usually get along with Portuguese somewhat well, even though they're obviously different languages. But going back to what I was talking about just a moment ago, one of the things that I feel sad about is that my father didn't teach me how to travel when I was a kid, and he could have. So my father was educated in a couple different countries, and including, for this conversation, including France. He got a certificate or a master's degree in France. I don't know the details, but it was something. And when I was 16 years old, my dad was harassing me in kind of a joking way, so to speak. But he was telling me, oh, you should go to Paris, and you should go to France, and you should do this. Well, let me tell you, when I was 16 years old, I didn't know how to do a damn thing, relatively speaking. And so for him to tell me at that age to go to France by myself, that was really stupid on his part. And the part that makes it more stupid, to the point of being kind of offensive to me, is that he had lived in France. He had lived in Paris. He had gone to school there. He had gotten some whatever diploma or certificate, or I think it may have been like a master's degree or something like that. But my dad lived and studied in France for, a reasonable amount of time. My dad spoke French. But again, for him to tell me, as an inexperienced, very lost 16-year-old, oh, go to France. What the hell was I going to do if I went to France by myself at that age? Other than get totally lost and not know what the hell I was doing, and probably not be able to figure it out. So he was basically, setting me up for failure, is what I realized many years later. Of course, I didn't know that when I was 16. But he was basically trying to set me up to go there and have a bad experience. And he did that in other ways as well. Actually, at the same time frame. So, my dad spoke English, Spanish, and French, but he never taught me anything. I mean, I grew up in the U.S. speaking English, but he didn't teach me Spanish. He certainly didn't teach me French. But when I was 16, same time frame I'm talking about right now, when I was 16 years old, my dad enrolled me in an advanced conversational Spanish college-level course at a reasonably high-ranking private school in a foreign country for the summer. And yeah, I failed the hell out of that class. But that was another example of how he kind of set me up to fail. And so with that very clear example, when I reflect on what he also said around that same time about me going to France by myself, it was just a dumb idea. So, whatever, those are just a few ideas I'm putting together about travel. But I think traveling is a really valuable experience. And I think if you are a good traveler and you can teach other people how to travel well, then I think it's a real gift that you can give them. Because it's not simply about going somewhere and renting a hotel and taking a flight and taking pictures. If you really travel well and learn how to appreciate the nuances between different cultures, then it's a really broadening experience. And like I said before, it helps to liberate people from feeling trapped in their jobs, home, occupations, whatever. When you know you can hit the road successfully and relocate and be free from anybody who's bothering you, that's quite liberating. And so I invite you to think about a few of those things and try them on, see if they work for you. And experience traveling in whatever way that you can. But, with more experience and with some work, you'll get better at it, and eventually you'll be good at it. And it'll add a lot to your life, I think. It certainly has to mine. I mean, I'm supremely glad that I've had the travel experiences I have had, including, many years ago. This is the last thing I'll mention. I never really thought much of it, but somebody said it was a really good move on my part. A friend of mine told me that, and I was like, well, I never even thought about it. I just did it. But like I've mentioned before, more than 10 years ago, I just packed up my stuff, was giving stuff away, selling stuff, throwing away stuff, hand over fist, literally. And I packed up my stuff and moved to Spain by myself. And I didn't even really speak Spanish then. I mean, I spoke a little bit of Spanish. Like, I could order some food or groceries or something, but I couldn't really have a conversation. And I'm glad I did that. It forever improved, the trajectory of my life. So again, if you're happy staying home and never traveling, then more power to you. But if you think you might get something out of it, then I invite you to consider, looking at some travel information, learning how to do it well, and studying it. One of the things I do, which my wife doesn't do, is anytime I'm going to go somewhere, I study the heck out of the options. Like, I'm really picky about hotels and where we're going to stay and where the restaurants are and what we're going to do. And I try to study quite a bit about the culture so I can understand it better. And I'll just give you a quick example. I mean, American culture is radically different from Spain culture, which itself is radically different from Colombian culture, which is, again, radically different from the culture in Chile or Mexico or Argentina. So, for me, I just feel like that's really enriched my life to understand different cultures. Not simply travel and take selfies and whatever people do, but travel and really understand as much as you can about the differences between different cultures. And then you can kind of pick from the buffet of your experience, what you want for your own life. And try some things on and see if you like them and see if they fit and see if they're comfortable. And if they are, you try to integrate that into your life. And if you don't like it, at least you have the experience of knowing that you don't like it. And, just because you go somewhere and fall in love with it doesn't mean you actually want to live there. Like the place I am now, I can visit this place maybe once or twice again in my life, but it's beautiful, as you can tell. But I wouldn't want to live here. So one of the things that I think we can also learn from traveling is that we get to go home and be happy. Traveling isn't always about going out and finding other places and saying, oh, I want to live there or whatever. Sometimes you go travel somewhere, or I go travel somewhere. I can love it. I can love the architecture. I can love the scenery. I can love the weather. And I can also love going back home to where I have other things that I also love and maybe even love them more. So, it's not always about going and finding things and relocating or buying a place or doing whatever. Sometimes you go and you travel and you enjoy it, and then you go back home even happier. And that has its benefit as well. But at least from experience, kind of what's out there and what works for you. So, hope you're all doing well. Those are just my thoughts on this somewhat random afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye-bye.